What happened in 2018 was I went on a friend's trip to Croatia. We did a co-working, co-living trip on a boat, and it was other entrepreneurs. And what that trip did for me is it showed me that there are people out there who are not employed in the same way that I am, which is my entire network up to that point, right, in Chicago and then New York. Here I am across the world. People are on this boat and they're working from the boat. People were literally like traveling, creating a lot of success in their business, running teams while being on this retreat with me. And that was such an expander of a moment for me. So what I would invite everyone into, and this is a term I use that I think makes a lot of sense, is like, who are the expanders in your life? Who in your life is showing you a different possibility? Because I think podcasts and books are very helpful to an extent, and they could plant the seed of a new possibility, but they're not usually enough to actually make the shift. Having an interpersonal connection with someone who's doing what you want to be doing is like 10x.
My personal life, over and over again, the people that's made the biggest difference are really mentors. Back in the old days, this disciple followed Jesus around like they were in close proximity with their rabbi. And similar to today, I think technology has made this whole modern day, I can get this quick fix, but reality is there's nothing that's gonna serve you better, in my opinion, by being in close proximity with a expander, like Marina mentioned, and you observe how that person acts in certain situations when they're under stress, when they're happy, when they're in a moment of opportunity. Do they seize it, or do they let someone else fight that battle? All right, well, welcome back, everybody. This episode is all about performance. And joining with me, we have a holistic mental health and wellness performance coach, Marina Kay. The accomplishments she's done throughout her life is quite astonishing. But let's just dive right into it, Marina. I'm curious, you being in the high performance space, what are some like key attributes, would you say maybe 3 attributes of a high performer?
Yeah. I would say the top 3 things that I see across people that I work with is first, resilience, meaning when things don't go according to plan, how you respond, I think makes all the difference. So being resilient in the face of stress and challenge, and especially things that are outside of our control. Embracing failure. So knowing that we actually learn more from failures than we do from things that work out well, that are successful. And then the third one, I was thinking about this, and I think it's actually letting go of caring about what others think about you. So letting go of the fear of judgment, that I think is one of the biggest barriers that I see that holds people back from having whatever it is that they want in life. And I think the successful people, whether it's entrepreneurs or just anyone who has a level of mastery that they've achieved in life, they've let go being defined by what other people think about them.
I feel each of those attributes you mentioned, one can spend like a decade working on those. It certainly doesn't happen overnight. So allow me to dive a little deeper. Would you say any of those attributes are people maybe inherently born with? Some people are just stronger than others when it comes down to resiliency, judgment of others, and not just having thick skin, perhaps, to your mention. Or all those 3 skill sets you mentioned, are they all acquired or can be acquired in life?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I actually think that any skill that is supportive of high performance, achievement, anything like that, success, can be learned. And I think that one of the most kind of insidious thoughts that holds us back is that I don't have what it takes because I don't have this like natural skill or talent. I wasn't born with it. And sure, there's different characteristics that come more naturally to us. But this is what I see hold people back so much, is that thinking and the comparison of, well, Kevin has X, Y, and Z, and this is his upbringing, or this is his, the way that his life has set him up for being who he is today. I don't have that. Therefore, I won't ever achieve what he has. And so I actually think that it's way more empowering. There's so much freedom in really seeing it as any skill that I see in someone else, I can also train myself to having and acquire. It might be a little bit more of a challenge to practice it, sure. But I really think that anything that we see in others, if it's a skill and a trait that we see in someone else, we're all 99% alike, right? And
Mm,
so it's just knowing that if it's possible for someone else, they're just an example of what's possible for us too. So yeah, I would actually say that like that question around like what's inherent versus what is acquired, anything can be acquired. And I wouldn't
I
want
love that.
anyone to take themselves out of the game of life, of achievement, of business, whatever it is, because of that thought. Like, I don't have what it takes, just knowing that it's all a learned skill.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And almost, I think to your point, literally 99% of things in the world that if we see in somebody else, we can acquire. Obviously, there's certain physical limitation. I mean, I'm an Asian guy. I'm not that tall. I'm 5'7", as you guys know. It's kind of see me hard to compete in like swim competition or maybe basketball and NBA. But outside of those extreme scenarios, where not necessarily my goals to begin with, right? Anything that you resonate, you can really tap into that. And I'm curious for you, Marina, what was your journey like? I mean, you went through the whole corporate ordeal, became a very successful in what you did in the HR space, and then moved into the mental health space, and now you're into leading high performers. So curious how your resiliency and ability to pivot again and again and embracing some of those ups and downs in life. Would you like to elaborate on some of that?
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
Mm,
I think it's about like the biggest shift we can do and focus on is how we see ourselves. And this is
mm,
something that I realized like over the years of me pivoting my career from being an HR leader in the corporate environment. So as Kevin was mentioning, I used to work with executives, I used to do HR consulting, I worked in startups and just all sides of different companies. And over time, the way you start to see yourself as becomes like the one and only way that you can kind of see yourself as how it relates to the world, right? Like the space that you contribute in. And
sure.
shifting that and pivoting that into something different, like seeing yourself in a different way and being open to the possibility of, yes, I've invested, a decade and my education and my whole network in this one space, but there's a possibility for me somewhere else and seeing myself differently.
Mm,
I think that what I got to work through on my path to becoming a coach and working through all the various things that are in the way, such as, at the time I had the idea of switching and becoming a coach when I was 25. So there was just a lot in the way of I won't be taken seriously. I don't have a higher ed degree like I do in HR and coaching, right? All sorts
mm,
of these different things. But I think ultimately underneath all of that, all of the self-talk and the mindset around it is just like I didn't see myself as someone who can do what I'm doing now. And I got to take the journey of proving to myself, first and foremost, to myself, and then to other people that I can do this, that it's valid, that I have what it takes. And in that, really shifting what I do into what I love,
mm,
right? And having more freedom through that.
mm.
For me, kind of the core of one of the reasons why I wanted to shift into coaching and doing what I do now is freedom. I have a very hard
Mm,
time taking direction from someone else. So part of it is also like me
mm,
knowing myself and the reasons why I wasn't happy in the corporate world really on like the core values of who I am. So there was just
yeah.
no way that I was going to fit into that structure long term. So something had to change. So freedom and really recognizing like, hey, I get to really optimize my life for the things that really matter
Mm,
to me, like freedom, like having access to pick up and go to Europe. Last week I did that, right? And just
yeah.
having
Yeah, you
access to
did.
that. And also really having a meaningful impact. And to me,
Yeah.
I think one of the things in the corporate environment that I really struggled with is kind of being lost in the shuffle, right? Being one of like thousands of people and
Hmm.
really not being and feeling connected to the ultimate outcome of my work. Whereas
Hmm.
now, when I directly work with an individual, I can have that impact on them, their family, their company. And so it's a much
Hmm.
more tangible connection to what I'm doing and what I'm creating in the world. I think those are like the two main reasons why I wanted to make the switch. And what it took from me to make the switch was being open to seeing myself differently first and foremost, and then really just like
Sure.
thinking about how do I close the gap. Okay, right now,
Mhm.
7 years ago, I don't have any experience in what I want to do, so how do I close the gap to having and experiencing everything that I want? So it's just a series of steps. I think that's where through that journey, I don't think I used to be as resilient as I am now. I think it was a really big stretch for me at the time So talking about resiliency and how it's a core skill for successful people and entrepreneurs and high performers, I think for me, that's something I really got to learn through the journey. Someone recently asked me, he was like, so how were you able to like let go of all the fear of like judgment and showing up and being perceived a different way? And I was like, I never let go of the fear. It's still there. But that's what resilience means, right? Is still being able to take action in the face of the fear.
Absolutely. Marina, I want to go back to the first part where you mentioned this. Stay with me right there when you were in your HR period, when you had this corporate identity, because a lot of you guys are listening out there. Maybe you're an accountant, maybe you're a project manager, maybe you're an engineer. And maybe you have this burning passion inside of you. Okay, I kind of want to do something else. I kind of want to shift into something else. But I dedicated the last 20 years of my life in this corporate identity. And it pays really well. I'm working like 60, 70 hours a week. I don't want to take a hit on my standard of living. None of us do. So talk to that person. When you kind of teeter-tottering, have this desire in your heart, three things I'm hearing that it's likely going to happen. You got to take some tremendous risk. You got to be able to let go of judgment, especially people say, what are you doing? Why are you pursuing this thing? You have 20 years in this career. You're expert in this field. And then lastly, you kind of have that resilience, like you said, and then not be afraid of failure and then kind of bet on yourself. And just also let you guys know, you guys are hearing, if you guys resonate with what Marina said, every guest I bring on the show, you guys have the honor and privilege reaching out to them, connect with them, have a conversation with them because they truly care about your livelihood and then making an impact in your life just as I do. So what are your thoughts to that person, Marina? Hey guys, I don't run any ads in this podcast because my mission is to make an impact in your life and help you move the needle towards your aspiration. It will mean a lot to me if you subscribe, share, or leave a comment. I would love to hear from you so we can spread the word and make a further impact together. All right, back to the conversation.
Yeah. So I love that you highlighted that what it's going to take from those listening who are in the space is taking risk, right? Really going for it, figuring it out, letting go of what people are going to think. Here's the thing. What I found for myself is that from the time that I identified that I wanted to leave the corporate world to the time I actually did, that was about 5-6 years in the making. And what I actually tried to do during that time was to make the idea go away. I was like, no, I'll just, everything's going so well. I'm so respected, right? It was a lot to let go of. And when I had the idea of like, this doesn't actually quite fit and resonate with me, I'd like to do something else. I literally tried to push it down and like say no to it for years and years and years. And I see this battle that so many people get into. So I think the first thing that I want to say is if there is this desire and this idea that you have, it's never going to go away. And what I have become present to, especially throughout the pandemic, because as you mentioned with my intro, I actually coached mental health first, and then I've switched into more like leadership and high performance coaching. But I have supported hundreds of people through mental health challenges, specifically depression and anxiety. And I really believe the root cause of some of those things is the suppression, like putting a lid on the wants, the desires, the things that, we wanted to do as kids or as young adults, the things that society or our parents or whoever else said won't make us money. And it's this suppression that actually results in so much struggle, quite literally physical manifestations of us saying no to our core desires show up as physical symptoms, as disconnection, as depression. And so I just want to highlight that because if anyone is like me and you're thinking like, this is like, I'm just going to push it out of sight, out of mind. In my experience, especially with those I've worked with as well, it kind of validated this hypothesis that I saw myself. It's not going to go away. And we might as well start to get resourceful around what are the steps to get you there. Maybe it's not this full career change. Maybe it's not going from like having a corporate job as a lawyer to having an Etsy store. That's a big stretch, right? Maybe that's an unfolding of several years. But as soon as you identify that desire and it's not going away and you notice that what you're doing now is out of alignment with your core values, we get to start taking action on it, even if it's small, tangible steps that just start chipping away at, okay, what needs to happen? Do you need to acquire new skills, new certifications? Do you need to go to some events? Do you need to talk to people who are going to support you? Do you need some role models in your
Mm.
life who are doing what you want to be doing, so that you can at least start to like ask questions around, what is it going to take? How does this work? How is your life like? So we get to start taking small steps right away. And it doesn't have
Mm.
to be like monumental, right? This does not mean that you have to quit your job right away. But I promise you, the desire won't go away. And if we try to make it go away, it's only going to impact our mental and physical health and that of our family, our kids, our friends in a really challenging way. So I think that would be the
Absolutely.
first thing I would say is, let's see it as many people have made this transition. No one is like
Mm.
asking you to get everything done all at once over, the course of a week. My favorite quote on this is, it gets to all get done, just not all at once. So it's like, how do you really take on these steps just one day at a time, one day at
Yeah.
a time? So,
Love it. Absolutely love it. And I resonate so much with what you said. You guys can literally walk down the street right now and then go outside, and you guys will see so many people, to Marina's point, kind of put on a mask of, okay, this is my identity. And then that inner child, that desire that she talked about. And you all know I'm a man of faith. I always say it like this. It's like when I
mm,
pray to God, that's my way of communicating him. My intuition that comes out, that's him communicating through the Holy Spirit to me. And
wow.
when that desire kind of comes out, like Marina mentioned, it's like that's the real you. That's kind of like the real purpose, kind of starts showing its glimpses of brilliance. But then we kind of put a mask on. Oh, it's got to put on this big hockey mask. I'm in this arena. I've been doing this for like years. I got to do all of this. And then, so in that journey, once someone kind of identifies that desire, I'm also hearing, hey, we got to be putting in some sort of work, whether that's getting that certification, whether that's getting coaching. Talk to us about like work ethic in terms of a high performer, because I'm seeing there's a group of I mean, you're in Austin, Texas, and I'm seeing a group of entrepreneurs where they spend like their whole morning like, oh, I gotta go to get a cold plunge, I gotta get my like $10 latte, and that's another 30 minutes, and after that I gotta get my breakfast taco, and by the time they start working it's like 11 o'clock, like half the day's already gone. I'm like, I'd rather just be working, just give me like a quick coffee, I'm ready to go. So curious, now that person's identified that desire,
Mm-hmm.
what's your perspective and take on work ethic?
Mm. I think the best path to becoming and stepping into a better work ethic, like being more committed, more disciplined, more dedicated, is actually through
Yeah.
physical health. And I've had
Mm.
this conversation with many people, and it applies to so many different areas of life. Where it came up recently was with a friend who is afraid to leave a relationship that isn't working, but
Mm.
she's afraid that she's not going to find something else, right? All of that self-doubt gets in the way, which is actually really similar as I'm saying this to someone who's afraid to leave a job that isn't working, right? And we think like, I'm not going to
Totally.
find anything else. This is scary. This is uncertain. I've been in this structure for a while. What is it going to look like otherwise?
Hmm.
Always my question for people in that situation is, do you feel healthy and strong in your body? Because when we feel disempowered, unhealthy, we have brain fog, whatever other health issues are going on, it's very hard to make empowered decisions for your future from that space. So,
Yeah.
actually, the first place I always invite everyone to start with is your relationship with yourself. Like, are
Yeah.
you in good physical health? How's your fitness?
Mm.
Like, can you walk up a flight of
Mm.
stairs? What is your
Mm.
nutrition like? Everything
Mm.
starts from there, because our physical health is one of the main drivers for our mindset. And so it's kind of like this pyramid, right? And this hierarchy of
Mm.
like, the base gets to be,
Mm.
how healthy are we? How empowered are we? How do we see
Mm.
ourselves in the world, right? When you look in the mirror,
Yeah.
do you feel proud of what you see? If
Hmm.
no, I would say that's the very first thing that gets to shift before you make all of these other bigger decisions. Because especially if you aspire to be, published author in the public light, starting a company, leading teams, people are only going to see you to the
Hmm.
level that you see yourself, right? If you have
Hmm.
disempowering beliefs about yourself, that always translates to what others see
Right.
in you. So that's always the first place to start, is how is your physical health? How is your fitness? And then the second step
Love
is you'll usually find positive impact on your mindset, which means that all of a sudden now you're proving to
that.
yourself that it's possible to get in shape, to be healthy, to overcome certain, things that have been present with you for a while, to start sleeping better. All of a sudden now you have a more empowering mindset and you're like, hey, what
Yeah.
else can I do? Right? Who else can I connect with? Like, yes, this is possible. So I think the first step is always like getting into a more empowered state of being and noticing like, what is your self-talk with yourself? How do you see yourself? Before like all the other like high performance things can be stacked on top of it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that so much. And I can attest 100% to what you just mentioned, especially my own journey as well, is when I put my health first, our body's like a temple. And
Mm.
then you have that foundation to be able to build more, stack more of like goals, aspiration on top of that. And specifically, also kind of to what Marina mentioned, like taking care of health. I know me being a guy, what really changed for me, it was a game changer when I really started focus on really building my skeletal muscle, not just like the guns on legs on chest like a lot of bodybuilder do at the gym, but really have this whole range of body just working on all these muscles, doing more of an Olympic lift, being in CrossFit. And when I stepped into that role, I just felt my energy level really just spike up throughout the day because all these little components in your body, we're all holistic, we're all mutually connected. And kind of also on that road, it's on that paradigm you're saying that you reap what you sow in life.
Mm.
And I'm curious on your perspective on this, because a lot of time I'm also seeing when people want to step into a high performer, they'll start off really strong. And then they'll maybe work hard and then they'll get in this routine for about a month and then 2 months. And then something unbeknownst to them, maybe to your point, a loved one walk out in their life, maybe some physical injury or something of that sort, and then they go right back to the bottom, and then they kind of revert back to their previous self. And why I think that's important, because everything that we do in life, we don't really see the results, especially in high performance space. We don't see the result till like 60 days, 90 days, sometimes 120 days later. But we're reaping what we sow. Like we're spreading seeds, we're casting seeds out there, and then we get a collect of fruits down the road. So
Mm.
in that perspective, when something does happen in life, you talked about resiliency earlier. How can people keep going? And what are your process on that?
The one question I always invite everyone to come back to is, no matter
Mm,
what is happening, no matter the circumstances in my life, what am I committed to? And
mm,
I think it starts with defining that for yourself. So I would invite
mm,
everyone to know, what is your set of values? What's like if there was an operating manual for Kevin, if we're just meeting
mhm.
for the first time, right? Any
Yeah,
kitchen appliance, before I can install it and start working with it, it has a operating manual. We don't have that
yeah.
for people. We get to define that though. Right. And
Mm,
so when you come into my life or I come into your life, how do we know how
mhm,
to relate to one another?
mhm.
Super important, super helpful, especially when running a team. But also, it's super helpful for you to know yourself. And a lot
Mm,
of people, this is also touching back to mental health. And what I've seen across people is that depression or mental health struggles, they start with us being disconnected and not knowing ourselves. So I think that first step is defining, what is your core set of values? What is your like operating system for being in the world? Because once you know that, once you have that written down, defined, you can like have it visible somewhere, it becomes much easier to stay committed in the face of things like, oh my gosh, now there's all of a sudden a global pandemic that's happening, or
yeah.
simpler things like my flight is delayed. How do I show up when there's a flight delay? Right. Or all of a sudden my partner wants to end our relationship. I didn't see this coming. What am I committed to in spite of that happening? Right. I think it starts with
Mm,
knowing yourself, your values, what's important to you. Because once you
right,
define that, the skill and that's acquired is now me putting my commitments and my values above how I feel day to day.
right.
Because a lot of
Ooh,
people will fall off their habits because they haven't
mm,
made that switch. The way that they
mm,
feel is still the most important thing that dictates
mm,
how their day goes, how they
mhm,
respond, how they react. Whereas we want to acquire the skill of putting what am I committed to above all else. That means
mm,
if I'm tired, I'm still kind to the person who's driving me to the airport, right? Because that's a non-negotiable. I'm no longer governed by the circumstances, the weather, other people, my neighbors. I'm governed by my commitments to myself, to my values. I know you're a man of faith. For many people, that works, right? My commitments to something higher that really governs like all of life for me. So I think it's that disconnection that has people fall off, and defining that could be really helpful and go a long way. And then also, I'll add in, it also takes some grace, like knowing that to form a habit and to even like acquire the skill that I'm talking about of putting commitments above all else, it's going to take some time, especially if this is not something that's familiar to you. I would expect that it takes 3 months to a year.
Yeah.
It's a journey. And we've all seen like those memes on Instagram where it's like you start here and you end here, and we think that it's just going to be this, when in reality it's like this, right?
Sure.
And then we
Yeah.
still end up here
Amazing.
through those
Yep.
learnings.
You sure
So
do.
there's a healthy dose of grace that's needed there too.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. Because I think in that piece, right, I think there are two camps of people. There's people that just kind of always all about how they're feeling, right? You got to have a sense of self-control. But when you talk about that self-control, really committing to that, what you're committed to, that vision of what's important to you, should people write that down? Actually, quick question. I feel like everyone should write that down if they're hearing this. Chances are, if you're hearing this and you don't have your core values right out, would you say that? I see Marina nodding. Like maybe put the
Let's get
podcast on
that done.
pause. Write that down. I mean, obviously, if you're driving, don't do it. When you get a chance at home, write that down. What your core values are. What's important to you. What your non-negotiables are. And also to what Marina mentioned, that I do feel like when it comes down to fruit of the spirit, with its love, patience, kindness, all of that, the last piece, that self-control one, is so hard. If you can have that self-control, and it's going to take some grace to be holding yourself to your core values, that's really going to set you up on the long run for success. So let's talk about like another scenario. I'm seeing there's a lot of folks on there that say, hey, Marina, I get what you're saying. I'm going to have resilience. This makes sense to me. I just wrote down my core values, but then I'm surrounded by negative parents. I'm surrounded by negative friends. And the moment I come up, they drag me down. So talk to that person. What's your message to that person, Marina?
For me, this was one of the pivotal things that happened in 2018. So by 2018, I had the idea of switching into a different career, into a different lifestyle for about 4 years. What happened in 2018 was I went on a friend's trip to Croatia. We did a co-working,
Okay,
co-living trip on a boat, and it was
let's
other
go.
entrepreneurs. And he
Yeah,
invited me. It was amazing. I taught yoga. I was part of like the wellness support
yeah.
for the group as well as a participant. And what that trip did for me is it showed me that there are people out there who are not employed in the same way that I am, which is my entire network up to that point, right? In Chicago and then New York. Here I am across the world. People are on this boat and they're working from the boat because they've set themselves up that way. That's how their life operates. They're going to go off the boat. They're going to go to Greece. They're going to spend more time there. They're going to enjoy it while still working. People were literally like traveling, creating a lot of success in their business, running teams while being on this retreat with me. And that
Sure.
was such an expander of a moment for me. So, what I would
Mm,
invite everyone into, and this is a term I use that I think makes a lot of sense, is like, who are the expanders in your life? Who in your life is showing you a different possibility? Because I think podcasts and books are very helpful to an extent, and they could plant the seed of a new possibility, but they're not usually enough to actually make the shift. Having an interpersonal connection with someone who's doing what you want to be doing is like 10x what a book will do for you. So if
yeah.
someone doesn't have that network, the first step is to cultivate it. And resourcefulness, I'll add that, I guess, to the list of like high performance traits, is like resourcefulness. Like, I'm here, I need to be here. What are the steps? What
Totally.
gets to happen? Right. And just being resourceful. Google, Facebook, Eventbrite, Meetup, I don't care, right? Different organizations, trips, communities. You get to put yourself in spaces where people are already doing and achieving what you want to do. That's going to be the most indispensable thing, because we can't always, eliminate family and friends in certain instances. Sometimes we can, sometimes we don't want to, nor do we need to, because everyone is on different paths in life, and grace and acceptance is also a part of this.
Right.
But
Mm-hmm.
also knowing that if your current network doesn't support you, great. We get to start to shift that and find a new network of people who are going to expand your set of possibilities.
Yeah. Absolutely spot on. And again, in my personal life, over and over again, the people that's made the biggest difference are really mentors. And this is really goes back to old school. Like back in the old days, this disciple followed Jesus around, like they were in close proximity with their rabbi. And similar to today, I think technology has made this whole modern day, oh, I can get this quick meme on Instagram. I can get this quick fix. But reality is there's nothing that's going to serve you better, in my opinion, by being in close proximity with a expander, like Marina mentioned, and you observe how that person act in certain situations when they're under stress, when they're happy, when they're in a moment opportunity to like seize it or to like someone else fight that battle, especially if there's someone that you wish, you look up to. It's
Mm-hmm.
those little moments that's really going to shape you and then catapult you to that next level. And just let me brag on Marina for a bit. She does work with high performers. So if you got like, hey, I'm serious, I want to take that next level, I'll put our contact information right here on Instagram so y'all can like reach out or something like that sort.
Yeah,
So
that'd be great.
Marina, you as a coach, like what's been like some of the biggest takeaway, or what's been like some of the most amazing transformative story that you had,
Mm.
whether it's working with a client or maybe it's your own? Love to hear a
Mm.
story.
That's so good. Honestly, I think it's just becoming present to the
Mm,
resilience of humanity, like in general.
yeah.
I think what's coming up for me right now is, before I started to work in mental health, I also didn't think that that was possible, because that felt like a
Hmm.
stretch. Whereas
Hmm.
in reality, like working in HR, there's a strong connection to working with people. And it's like
Hmm.
HR is basically the coaches inside of a company, right? We support
Hmm.
humans in promotions and, all sorts of different
Hmm.
things.
Sure.
So there was a bridge there, but I didn't really see the immediate connection. And I acquired skills in the space and certifications and things like that allowed me to begin to work with people in this space. And at first, I had a big block around, like, it's not going to be possible for me to support them. Or if someone is truly experiencing something like depression, I don't know what could be done, right? Is this really something that someone can shift out of? And over the years, both working with people one on one and also being just in the space of high performance and, going to various events, right? Tony Robbins, things like that. What I saw over and over and over again is how someone could be starting from bottom. Someone
Mm,
could be really in, like, you hear their story and you're like, there's no way. How is this person going to overcome this? This is crazy, right? Either they lose everything or they've suffered abuse, or so many different things could happen to someone. And over and over and over again, I have so many stories and examples of people who have overcome that and create a better life. And I think the overarching like lesson in that I've taken away is that I don't care what you have gone through. I don't care what has happened to you. All of those things are truly circumstances that have happened in our life. They don't define us, they don't limit us
mm,
from what the future holds. I have seen people overcome some of the most like insane challenges in life, and they come out better and stronger, and to the point where if
let's
they tell the
go.
story of a past abuse or a trauma, it doesn't even have that charge in the body anymore, right? They can go from
Yeah.
telling you what happened to them in the past and then telling you what they had for breakfast. It's possible. And the overarching theme is just like, humans are so resilient. Some of us aren't in that space because we haven't had enough examples in life. Like,
Yeah.
I'm able to say this because I've seen it over and over and over again. I've seen so many examples that have validated this. And some
Yeah.
people might be hearing this and they're like, yeah, but you don't know my story, or you don't know my circle or my situation, the neighborhood I grew up in. And what I would say is, it's just about acquiring examples in support of why it's possible to overcome it, right? Some of us just don't
Mhm.
have enough evidence. And that's why some people will listen to this and go, no, but it's not possible for me. And so my invitation would just be like, collect evidence. Like, listen to podcasts, read books, connect with others, go outside of your circle in any means possible. Like some people will say, well, I can't like in my community, in my neighborhood. Okay, great. Online is the greatest connector that we have, right? Resources like this, Kevin putting together this podcast, like it's so abundant what you can find out there. Yeah, I guess that's my little dose of positivity. That's not just like fluffy positivity, because I'm telling you, it's backed up by so many examples that I've seen in people.
You guys just see me nodding my head this entire time. This is like 10,000% true what Marina just mentioned right there. And yes, everyone's story is unique, but you're also one decision away from changing your life. You're literally one decision away from changing your life. And what a beautiful thing is, and Marina knows this, when the moment you kind of start betting on yourself, because I think that's one thing that makes me really sad. So many people are living a shadow or a shell or a husk version of what they could potentially be, and that's my passion to able to serve you so you can step into your greatness in that regards.
Love
So
that.
Marina, I want to touch base maybe on like one last thing right here, maybe for folks that are into high performance now, they're kind of stepping into this role. And I'm curious, in terms of like having a balance, is it possible? Because obviously people wants to win, hopefully in multiple areas of life. I know I want to win in all areas of my life, whether it's my career, business and real estate and relationships, faith, all of that. Is it possible to win in all areas? And if it is for people that are starting off, do they have to put in a tremendous amount of effort? Because we're hearing this terminology, while the rocket ship takes the most amount of fuel, just break past the atmosphere. Once you get to that certain level, it's a lot easier. And that part people are really afraid of. Let's be honest here. So I'm curious, what's your perspective on that when people do start embracing that identity?
You and I use the same analogy, but I say the train. It takes the most energy to get the train
There
to
we
leave
go.
the station. But once the train is in motion, it takes a lot less energy to just coast and keep
100%.
going. Yeah.
Yeah.
And what comes up for me before I get to the full answer is it takes people the longest time to get to the point of making the decision. A decision actually takes a second to make, right? So where people get really stuck is spinning the wheels around the making of the decision and going back and forth and back and forth. But a decision takes a second, right?
Yeah.
Like me thinking about going on that trip that really changed the trajectory of my career for me and was such an expander. The decision took place in a second. The decision was I take my credit card out and I pay for my spot on the trip. But it usually takes weeks, months, for some people years, for some people decades to get to the point of the decision. So I
Yeah.
would just invite everyone to notice, where are you really leaking your energy and spending so much energy on the space of like staying in indecision, whereas just making decisions and getting feedback, right? It's way better to make the decision and make the wrong one versus spend 10 years in fear of making the decision in the first place, right? So I definitely want to highlight that initially and just give everyone some encouragement around like, hey, let's just get in the weeds. Let's just start getting some right numbers on the board. Let's get some shots in, and then
Yeah.
we can pivot and
Yeah.
get more feedback from that. What was your original question?
Yeah. So when people are afraid, perhaps they see this daunting amount of work ahead of them. They're just getting started on that journey. And then they just start rolling that snowball. It takes a tremendous amount of force to get that going. And I almost also think whether you're an entrepreneur or you're an intrapreneur, and in my case, it was like this as well, is I sacrificed years of my life with just like work in chaos and learn how to thrive in chaos. And I'm wondering if that's a prerequisite in order to get to that quote unquote semi active cruise control, because you're never in fully cruise control in life. You're semi active. So
Yeah.
I'm curious what your perspective on that is. It almost feels
Yeah.
like it's a prerequisite because all the entrepreneurs that made it, all the entrepreneurs that made it, they sacrificed so much to get there. And a lot of time I feel like that, those years in their life, they kind of just like, well, let me tell a story. I put in all this work and then here I am. Yeah.
That's interesting. And I know you had also asked about like balance and is it possible to be balanced
Yeah.
on this journey of
hmm
this potential chaos that gets to happen.
Yeah.
I really think that a way to minimize that chaos and like the back and forth and the challenge is to start with the values and what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think a lot of times, and I know this is kind of contradicting what I just said, which is like, hey, let's just start to take action and like pivot then. It's like a both and, right? Both get to be in place, because throwing spaghetti at the wall helps us get to know ourselves better and to validate, like, are these values and things that are important to me, are they actually true, or is it something else? But I think the reason why so many people spend time in chaos or have the story that it's going to be hard or difficult or challenging, I'm not going to know what to do, is because we don't begin with defining what's important to me. What do I want to be in place? Like, one of my best mantras now in this new stage of my life is, it gets to be easy. And that
Let's
is like
go.
my
Yeah.
overarching, like, operating thought behind everything that I do. I mean, to your point, I did spend some time in chaos for sure. So maybe a little bit of that is necessary, but is it necessary to stay there forever and keep ourselves there and have this narrative around like, it's going to be hard, I have to brace myself, right? Like, challenge is always going to be there. I don't think so, because I think if we have a really strong North Star behind why we're doing what we're doing, if it's pivoting a career or going through some other impactful change, if we know what's important to us and what we're committed to, I think it shortens the timeline. We don't spend as much time in stress and chaos. We get to decision making a lot faster, because the skill
100%.
is, how can I
Yeah.
get to making aligned decisions quicker, faster, more efficiently? So that if I know myself, if I know what's important to me, I also spend less time in indecision. It also becomes a lot easier for me to say yes, no, as soon as I'm faced with a choice, and like keep going and keep iterating. So I think it starts with, again, that knowing yourself, knowing your values, why you want to do whatever you want to do in life. Like, what's your vision? Like, do you
Yeah.
even have a strong vision, or is it just something that you think would be a nice to have? Because that's
Yeah.
usually not enough to create meaningful, impactful change. Like, it has to be something
Love
that you're
that.
committed to at all costs that gets to happen. And then I think from knowing yourself and defining your values and really feeling rooted and grounded in that, you can have it all, because not all of us want the same things. Like, I bet you, if we look at our lists of like our visions and our core values and what's important to us and the areas of life that we're working on, we probably have some overlap for sure, but some we don't. And I always tell people that, like, you get to have whatever you want, because it's different from everyone
That's
else in the
right.
world, because no one is
That's
alike.
right.
It's like,
Yeah.
yes, we are 99% alike in like who we are and what's possible, but we also don't have the same wants and desires as, a lot of other people. And so
Yeah.
in that regard, like, yeah, of course you can find balance, because for some people, being a parent is really important. For some, it's not. For some, there's other areas, right, that they want to be more connected in. So I think that's another important thing to define, is like, what are the areas of life that are important to you that you want to find balance and success in, and being honest in that.
Yeah. I absolutely love that. And you'll be surprised, because when I hear that you talk about core value vision, and then sometimes even you mentioned earlier, it takes a bit of chaos to get to that next stage. And then you get to say, hey, this gets to be easy. What I often found is a lot of people, it's like I talk to someone young, it's like, wow, I want a boatload of money. And I said, well, tell me more. What does that look like? What does that mean to you? I don't know, $1 billion. Okay, well, what I've learned to realize is, then I talk to people in their 30s that had that similar vision in their 20s, like maybe they made their first million or second million, like, you know what, that no longer serves me anymore. I don't need to be in this chaos to get to that billion. I'm happy now. My goals have shifted into different alignment in life, what's even more important in my life. So all that's also to say, amazing session, Marina. Thank you so much. And takeaway for you guys, again, if you haven't had a chance to write down your core values and vision, definitely take that as a quick homework assignment, jot it down after this episode. And thank you so much for joining us. I'll leave your contact information in the description below. And I'm sure the audience are absolutely in awe with all the impact and wisdom you share with them on this call.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, thanks everybody. I'm excited to connect more. Definitely get those values and visions and what you're committed to down. That's going to support literally every area of life. So, yeah, it's a pleasure.